Well, good afternoon, boys and girls. This is Vince Bird of the 11th Hour Remnant Messenger, Church of Jesus Christ Christian. We are an evangelical outreach of the True Church of Israel, not to be confused with the evangelical church of today, the Catholics and the mainline denominations that exist throughout the United States and the world. Today I'm talking about Jeremiah, the prophet, his sojourn into Ireland, and this will be part two. And today on part two, I'm going to derive most of my notes and information from a gentleman by the name of Michael R. Birch, who had done extensive research. And of course, I have researched other extant documents to prove that Michael's research was accurate. And of course, the Bible doesn't move much beyond Jeremiah leaving Jerusalem for Egypt right after Nebuchadnezzar's sacking of Jerusalem. However, the historical record, which will then show the fulfillment of Yahweh's prophecy that Jeremiah would build and plant, again, has been fulfilled in the nation of Ireland and in Spain, where he took Zedekiah's two daughters, which were of the royal line of the tribe of Judah, to the Milesian kingdom in Spain and in Ireland that had been established many hundreds of years before, and married them into the royal line, and they were royals themselves, therefore fulfilling Yahweh's prophecy to build and plant, and that the throne of David will will always have a man on it. And that prophecy has been fulfilled in fact. So we're going to look at the Stone of Scone, which is on the coronation chair, which resides right now in Ireland, in England, I believe. It was in Scotland for several hundred years until the English went in and plundered Scotland and took the chair back to England. The Scottish lay claim to it. This is the stone as it appears today. You can see the handles on it. This is the Stone of Scone, Jacob's Pillar, the Stone of Destiny. Was hauled throughout the 40-year wanderings in the desert or wilderness. It wasn't a desert. And was the rock that Moses struck and spoke to, or was to speak to bring forth living water. We have a picture of it on a platform here, which I'll bring up here so you can see it right there. That'll give you an idea of the size. It's approximately 4 feet long, 1.5 feet high, 1.5 feet wide. And the Irish know who they are because here's an Irish singer by the name of Stephen MacDonald, and he put out a whole album about the Stone of Destiny, which talks about Olam Fala, Jeremiah the prophet, Brug, his scribe, the Stone of Destiny, and a number of other little ditties that reflect the time period when Jeremiah went to Ireland. Okay, how important is the Stone of Destiny to Scotland? Where does Scotland come from? Well, it is arguably the greatest symbol and touchstone of Scottish nationhood, and as such has been a very potent icon for more than 1,000 years. The Highland Heritage Society says today the stone is still the greatest Scottish icon of all times. Remember, the Stone of Scone, while it was taken to Ireland first, it moved to Scotland, and then it moved to England. And the Scottish people lay claim to it. The English know that it really belongs to the Scotch, and to the Scots, and they have borrowed it, and the Scots have graciously loaned it to them. On St. Andrew's Day, November 30th, 1996, the Stone of Destiny was returned to Scotland exactly 700 years after King Edward of England carted it off to Westminster Abbey in 1296. According to one account, about 10,000 people lined the Royal Mall to watch the procession of dignitaries, and troops escort the stone from Holyrood Palace to the castle. In a service at St. Giles Cathedral, the Church of Scotland moderator, the Right Reverend John McIndoe, formally accepted the stone's return, saying it would strengthen the proud distinctiveness of the people of Scotland. Okay, according to the historical record, the Leofale was lent to the Scots by the Milesians, or the Irish, for the coronation of their new king, and the Scots neglected to return it. It was later stolen by King Edward I of England, the Hammer of Scots. The Leofale may have been both taken revenge and fulfilled its purpose, for the next King of England was of the Milesian line and no relation of Edward's. The Leofale was one of the 13 hallows, or the gifts, of Ireland, and is the only one known to exist today. The Stone of Destiny is a large, it's 152 kilograms, slab of sandstone upon which Scottish kings used to be crowned. And there were indeed such mythic and fabulous creatures as Scottish kings, and as such it has the connotations of the rock into which Merlin legendarily thrust the Excalibur. The English, hated and despised by the Scots, put their faith in the sword as proof of legitimate kingship. The Scots, hated and despised by the English, put their faith in the rock itself. Must the English and Scots always be at loggerheads? Well, unfortunately for them, it seems that they must. Whether they were one and the same rock, of course, is a matter of speculation, and there is no reason to believe that they were not. But as symbols, the sword and the stone are utterly compelling and seem to tell us a tale beyond the historical facts and words. The Celtic name of the Scottish coronation stone is Leofale, the speaking stone, because it named the king it would soon enthrone, and might sing or roar with joy when he sat upon it. Cambray, in his Monuments Celtiques, claims to have seen the stone when it bore an inscription, Ni fallet fatem Scoticocimque loquitum inventie lapidium regnasse tenitur ibidium. If the destiny prove true, then the Scots are known to have been kings where men find this stone. As Scone, the coronation stone, was reverently kept for the consecration of the kings of Alba, and according to one chronicler, no king ever wanted to reign in Scotland unless he had first, on receiving the royal name, sat upon this stone of Scone. Okay, well, I can belabor this and go on, but I will touch upon a couple of the other issues that this gentleman speaks about. We're talking about more modern history here. When Queen Elizabeth died, Queen Elizabeth I died, King James VI of Scotland became King of England, thus uniting England and Scotland. From that day forward, there has been no king or queen of Scotland who is not primarily the king or queen of England. And the English crown jewels have sufficed for the entire United Kingdom, with the result that the Scottish crown jewels were no longer used. The Treaty of Union on March 7, 1707, dissolved the Scottish Parliament, stipulated that the Scottish regalia would remain in Scotland, but soon after the Treaty of Union was signed, the crown jewels mysteriously disappeared. Many Scots believed the English had purloined them. In 1818, the Prince Regent, who later became George IV, gave one of Scotland's most famous literary personages, Sir Walter Scott, permission to rummage through Edinburgh Castle in search of them. The jewels were found in a little strong room where they had been wrapped in linen cloths, locked in an oak chest and walled up. They were found exactly as they had been left in 1707. It seems that Walter Scott was both the author Conan Doyle and Sherlock Holmes of his day. Okay, so now on to unraveling the mystery shroud surrounding the Stone of Destiny. According to the Old Testament, Jacob, who later changed his name to Israel, actually he didn't, Yahweh, Father God did, and thus became the first Israelite. He lay his head on a stone pillow at Bethel, fell asleep, and had a dream of Jacob's ladder, upon which he saw angels ascending and descending. A tradition that explains the king-making aspect of the stone goes like this. Jacob used the stone as a pillow. While sleeping on it, he received a vision from God. who claimed that his seed would spread across the earth and rule as kings until their return to the promised land. Jacob took the stone after awakening and anointing it with oil, very important ritual, as kings are anointed with oil. For a time the stone rested in the temple at Jerusalem. In 602 BC, Jerusalem was sacked and destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. It is said that Jeremiah, along with the two daughters, and we have proof of this in the Irish history, of King David's line escaped with the stone, and after a journey through Egypt, Sicily, Spain, the stone arrived in Ireland. That the one stone seems to have disappeared from Israel shortly before another stone appeared in Ireland is of interest. Also of interest is the Irish story of the Tuatha De Danann, which when translated apparently needs the people of Danaan. One of the 12 tribes of Israel was known as Dan, and we know that Dan were the great seafarers of the world, probably coming to the New World, America, 1,000 years before Columbus or more, maybe 1,500 years before Columbus. They certainly sailed the ocean. They were known as Phoenicians, and the great nations of Europe, and many of the rivers are named after the tribe of Dan. We have Denmark, we have the Danube River, we have Dansk, Poland. We have lots of places in the European nations that have adopted the name of Dan. They knew who they were. There is even a prophecy that the stone will be returned to Israel ahead of a great number of its people, and when it does, the Temple of Jerusalem will be rebuilt. For a very interesting and very mysterious timeline of the stone from Jacob to day, you can go to the internet or other researches. Okay, the stone was last used in coronation in Scotland in 1292 when John Balliol was proclaimed the king. 4 years later, in 1296, the English monarch Edward I, infamous as the Hammer of Scots and nemesis of Scottish national hero William Wallace, invaded Scotland. Among the booty that Edward's army removed was the legendary stone, which the English king apparently regarded as an important symbol of Scottish sovereignty. The present coronation stone made its way to the house in 1300 to the English house in 1301. Okay, so we see that the stone of Scone came out of Jacob's resting on it one night, was held and venerated by the Israelite peoples for thousands of years, still is held in high esteem and regard, and almost as a sacred symbol of Yahweh in England, Scotland, and even Ireland, because it was rooted there when Jeremiah brought it along with Tiatafi to marry into the royal line of Milesians. Now I'm going to give you a little family tree here, and you can find this on the internet, but I thought I'd bring it to you for your edification. And we're going to see that the house of Judah and the Pharaoh's Terah line moved through into what has become known as the United Kingdoms. Now from there, predominantly Manasseh, which was one of Joseph's sons, and Ephraim, which is another of Joseph's sons, were fulfilling the promise of Yahweh God to Jacob Israel and Abraham, Moses, and Joshua, that they would be a great people, they would be a great nation, they would be a company of nations, they would be a mighty nation, they would be as plentiful as the stars in the sky and the sands of the sea. And there are a number of other prophetic messages that were given that would identify these people called Israelites. The Jew cannot possibly fit not one of those prophecies. They have never been a mighty nation. They the little sandbox that they reside in over there is smaller than Lake Superior. They could not exist without help from the United States and other nations. They are surrounded by people who hate them. They are hated throughout the world wherever they go. They have not yet been hated in the United States of America because the sleeping public has been indoctrinated for more than 150 years. Hitler never let it go that long. He only let them do it for 50 before he got rid of them. And we should have got rid of them years ago. But they have none of the tags. They have none of the symbols. They have nothing that's in their character, their writings, their actions that would give any indication that they are Yahweh's chosen. Their true Bible is the Talmud. Their true God is Lucifer. They are parasites living off the productivity, creativity of the rest of the world, and they are the famous money changers from the beginning of time, beginning in the temple when Jesus fashioned a rope and scourged those evil Jews. Then, and on the last week of his life, as he, after his triumphal entry into Jerusalem, Yeshua Yahweh went into the temple and scourged those evil son of a bitches a second time. And yet they move about the world, creating financial disasters wherever they go, subjugating peoples as they take over the control of money and wealth. And they are just. But Yahweh is going to deal with them. Praise Yahweh. If we are not able to do it as commanded since the beginning of time. And we Israelites were commanded to destroy these Kenites, Canaanites, children of Nimrod, the Khazars, Ashkenazis, seeds of Satan, Edomites from the loins of Esau. We were commanded to destroy them from the get-go, and we have failed to do it. We made a half-hearted attempt in biblical times, but we carried off their women and fornicated with them and had offspring that were mixed race peoples, and Yahweh's going to deal with them. But if we fail to do it in this day and age, which we are still commanded to do, when Yahweh returns, he will utterly destroy every one of them. The sooner the better. I wish it happened yesterday. The world would be a far better place without every one of them. Anyway, I have said my piece. I hope you learned something today. We talked about Jeremiah the prophet, where he went after he left for Egypt after the Babylonian, just prior to the Babylonian captivity, how he went to Ireland, Spain, and what he took with him and who he took with him. And I think this will give you a clearer picture of the Christian identity message, because this stone of scone is a very important symbol of who we are and why we went where they went. And here we are, a great nation, the United States of America. Some say we're predominantly Manasseh, the tribes of Manasseh. We're the Anglos, but you know, we are a meld of the European, Indo-European nations. You know, we have the Norwegian, Scandinavian immigrants living in the northernmost tier states, Minnesota, the Dakotas, parts of Washington and Oregon, and even Idaho, Montana. We have the Italians that came over and settled predominantly in the east and slowly migrated somewhat to the west, but predominantly in the east, New York City, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, the mining towns. That's where they worked. We Italians, and I am Italian, worked in the mines and the mills, and that's what we did. German immigrants, we all came, and everyone that came, by the way, paid their dues. They were vilified by the Anglos, who were here first. They were kept down. We pretty much lived in our enclaves. There's Little Italy, there's Little Germany, there's Scandinavian town, and there's they kept part of the culture because we were browbeaten, beaten down. I mean, I know when my father came from Italy, he was called, believe it or not, a greaser, a dago, one of the Goombas. Even though he wasn't associated with or knew no Sicilians. We were Northern Italians because he was Italian and carried his Italian name. He was broad-brushed with the mafioso, which was prevalent at the time in Chicago and New York. And so that's the way it was. We all suffered. We were all slaves. The whites were slaves. Little people know that when the Pilgrims came over and the Puritans came over, as the Anglos brought them, those who could afford passage would bring along people who would be indentured servants to them for 5 years before they could be free citizens in the United States of America. Not many know that. A nigger certainly wouldn't know that. The whites were slaves on ships. We Israelites were slaves in Israel. We were white slaves in Israel. We were white slaves in Babylon. We were white slaves in the Assyrian captivity. We have been white slaves. We have been shanghaied and hijacked in the seaport bars to be crew members on the sailing ships in the days of old. We were whites and we were slaves. And but the nigger won't talk about that. They only want to lament about their lot in life as a result of being brought over not by we whites but by the Jew who owned the slave ships, who did the brokering of these Jews to the various and sundry people in the United States for labor. And that's what slaves are all about, cheap labor. The whites were cheap labor on cruise ships in the days of the sailing ships. The whites, Israelites, were slaves in Egypt, building pyramids and buildings and the edifices for the royalty. And the Egyptians themselves, which arguably some were Israelites in the beginning. So, virtually everyone's been a slave at one time or another. I mean, look at the Chinese, for crying out loud. The warlords had half of the dynasties, and they go back thousands of years, had Chinese people as slaves. Everybody enslaved everybody else. That's the way the world worked. Cheap labor. Okay, so, and I lay no claim to, I'm getting off topic here, but I do that. Let's talk about that black issue one more time. My family didn't come over from Italy until the 1920s, after Mussolini came into power. They knew who he was, and so they left. They didn't want to be under fascist Italy. But so coming here in the 1920s, these blacks, even today, are laying claim to reparations, and they're all over we whites, most of whom came over during the Industrial Revolution to feed the factories and build the population of America. We were Indo-Europeans. We weren't the Orientals. We brought those over to build the railroads. And the blacks were here plantation days to grow the corn and cotton and whatever. But we Italians came over. We worked in the mills, and we worked in the mines, and in the coal mines, the steel mills, copper mines, you name it. That's what we did. And so these blacks mean nothing to me. I mean, I had nothing to do with it, and my family had nothing to do with it, and nobody in my family, as far over as you want to go in cousins, second cousins, uncles, aunts, brothers, sisters, nephews, whatever, had nothing to do with them goddamn blacks. And I refused to bow down, kowtow to them, and listen to the likes of Jesse Jackson and the Most High Reverend, whatever his name is, I can't even think of it anymore, and the rest of those uppity people who try and shame us to kowtow to them, who we are. I mean, we are, those who built civilizations. We don't tear them down. We create things that are beneficial to mankind. We don't burn them, steal them, and take them apart and sell them. I mean, we are creators. We have the Spirit of God within us. We do these things out of the goodness of our heart. We don't grow enough food for our household. We grow enough food for our neighbors. We grow enough food for the community. We grow enough food for the country. And when we have more than enough food, we either give it or sell it to other countries who don't have it. That's what we do. A black never did that in his entire history of his culture, and an Oriental never did it in the entire history of their culture. So we whites are the chosen of Yahweh God. We have the Spirit of God within us. Those other races don't. And they hate us for it, all of them. They hate us for it, and they can't wait till we go away. But what they don't know is that when the white race finally becomes so few, or barring the return of Yeshua Yahweh, when we become so few that we can no longer be productive or creative in such a fashion that we can do what we've done in the past, civilization is going to cave in, and they're going to revert to walking in their unshod feet down dirt roads, because the highways will grow with weeds. The cars and the automobiles and the power plants and the motors and the generators and the electronic devices will all die or rust or rot away. And the buildings will start to cave in, and of course they'll destroy the buildings. They'll steal it and sell whatever they can out of it to think that they're going to live another day. Civilization will crumble without us. And there you go. Anyway, I'm done. Praise Yahweh. May God bless you and keep you, and may His face shine upon you. May He lift His countenance upon you and give you peace if you are white. Amen.